Alright, so here we are kicking off the April turn for the Trail of the Fox part of things. And the Commonwealth, well, the Axis didn't get the initiative. And the Commonwealth chose to force the Axis to go first in the hopes of getting a double turn and being able to win it all on turn 7. The Axis couldn't stretch this line any further down. There's a distance limitation to what they can do, so they pulled back this way. That may not be sufficient. As I've noted, the U.S. can actually just sort of squeeze through the border of the map, and I got no additional supply. I have no way of defending outside of supply. Now, let's say I defended this hex. I think I could get there. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this hex could have been in supply. So if I made the line down here, it would have been okay. And I think I just made my line unimportant by pulling it this way. That would have been fine with a single turn, but if the Allies get a double turn, I think they can scoot around there. Nothing changed here or in Tunisia, though. They've got the defense that they want, they figure. Who knows? This disrupted unit, well, I'm going to park it in Tripoli to make it so that Tripoli can't be taken trivially or something. Assuming no force marches. We'll get back to that in a moment. Assuming no force marches, I can get to, I think, about here with a unit that I could throw an emergency supply this turn. Of course, he won't be in supply next turn, which actually means he wouldn't get there. It would only be if I could keep the supply. I don't think that I can just brush through. I think I need to control the road. I'm just not sure Tripoli can be taken at this point in the game by any reasonable means. And obviously, a supply line can be slipped through here and then a dump built here, but I don't have any trucks in the front, so I'd be delayed. Remember, the Allies have been kind of scraping by with their supplies as well. I really think that the Germans trying to delay the Commonwealth here is a vital move towards winning this game, rather than, you know, Rommel's own plans involved going to Tunisia. Well, then you're putting all your eggs in one basket. You've actually got a chance of delaying this. This isn't that hard to hold here. This situation, well, if I can think of a way around it, I will, but I'm not coming up with one. Of course, this game is full of these kind of little puzzles that come, you know, through the normal play of the game, but positions where, if I could just get there, I could do a big thing, you know. In addition, I have to take Gabes. That's another port point. And that right now is in Axis hands. So slipping through Tripoli isn't enough. Great. Well, the U.S., all I can find to attack is this space here. Now I've placed this unit in a position where this one's allowed to react. But what he can't do is he can't react into this space, forcing an attack here. He can slip around behind and add some strength, but that's it. I haven't gotten to these guys yet. I can't figure out what to do. I've been concentrating on the Tunisia map, primarily at this point. For the Brits, you know what? If they can't break the line now, they'll never be able to break it. It's that simple. This is all their troops. They're facing the river line. Yes, I could try to do something clever to get around, but I got to get across the river line to win this. It's got to be done in the next 2 turns. It's got to happen. You know, I'm not going to be able to reposition the entire English army to the rear. I've got the French shifting over to try to crack a hole in the rear where the river isn't protecting the enclave. But I couldn't launch an actual attack with any odds. You know, I could get like a 1-to-1 with options for the Germans to pull more troops in. You're going to see lots of repositioning of the Axis units here, and the Brits probably aren't going to make it across, but that's all they can do. You'll notice one thing, I'm not so worried about supply anymore. That's because everything can trace back to the entry Axis now. Over here I gotta, except for the French, over here I gotta worry about supply. I've got a couple dedicated dumps here, and then this one back here is also supporting, I think. And you know, if I get the break here, what can I do? Maybe I can pocket these guys. If I can get most of them out of the way, Tripoli should be an open road. That's the best I can hope for. I can't circumvent them. I'm pretty sure of that. Not with any chance of success. Here, this is a pointless situation. You know, if I attack en masse, the Germans fall back. If I try to go around the corner, the Germans fall back. Or mainly Italians there now. There's too much space to cover to expect to get Tripoli. I'll continue on with it, but I'm not expecting the Commonwealth to gain any ground there, really, of any significance. I mean, they're going to make the next Wadi line, or the next Wadi line, you know. Eventually they'll get there, but, you know, the course of the game is, I got to do it by here if I want to win. These two turns become Axis successes. Commonwealth attack is an interesting spur of decisions. I chose to surround this unit, try to destroy it, weaken the line by making it smaller and smaller. Hey, maybe if I make it small enough, I can break through. Because a frontal assault, you know, obviously the Axis can just withdraw, and they want to because they don't have enough dumps to support all those attacks. So I gotta peel off units at best. Over here, I've actually got this guy surrounded too. So he's not going anywhere. He has to fight. These can come into play and force the attack to be broader. If they do so, I may be getting into the supply range. I may be getting into the point where the Germans can't support all their units. They have a lot of dumps here now, though, and another one up in Tripoli. So I think they can handle an attack on half the line. On the other hand, this part has kind of been weakened, so I could strengthen the attack to the south. And there's some opportunity during the Axis turn, no, they're not going to take it, that's for sure, to make it a counterattack against some of that. But as it stands, it's really a question, do you want to commit these units? If you do, and the line kind of collapses, there might be a gap, and I might be able to cut off this part. And that would be a serious problem for the Axis. On the other hand, what's left doesn't really look like it can hold the line. Of course, it can stretch out and withdraw and withdraw, you know, as long as I reach the edge of the map. But I was damn close to the edge of the map here. And this stupid little piece can't do dick, because I throw it into any attack and it's going to cause a column shift against me, which just kind of sucks. Okay, I'm doing these battle lines a little at a time. Oh, geez, there's a piece on the floor, and I don't know what it's from. I don't know how I could have gotten there. Gotta think about that. Yeah, I'm just not sure. Probably came off my elbow. We'll give it a weakened motorized piece kicking around down here because it was probably on the board. Anyway, there were successes over here against the southernmost units that were isolated, and those were all completely destroyed, but at the cost of a pretty good stack, and actually another armored unit outside that stack, one of these that got hit in a partial, being knocked out for a while. But the Axis is in much, much worse position. And now I can kind of try to subvert this whole line. I think it'll still escape. I don't see any way to pin the whole thing down. This is too strong. But if I'm lucky, there's two things I could do. Maybe I could isolate this unit and attack it. That would probably be the best thing, because there's just not much left. If I can get that surrounded and attacked with the majority of my force, there's not much left for the Axis to do. They could even plow into me, and then they'd be cut off and destroyed. The other option, of course, is trying to drive upward and force them to attack their own way out. If I can take this, they're not going to be able to get through those marshes there. Now, I'm doing these segment by segment. I don't think there's a problem with that because attacks are actually, even in terms of the game, but I'm going to focus now in on this line, and then I'm going to go up to the ugly, ugly Tunisia area where I think the Brits are in a lot of trouble attacking that one. The Axis being able to react up in there was enough to bring it down to 1-to-1 odds in a fort. Not a good thing. The American army is destroyed. Yeah, it looks hopeless at this point for the Allies to meet their timetable. And there really wasn't another alternative. There wasn't something else I could do to try to subvert the line or something, and I had to attack. I did it with the best that I could as far as I could see. I could have gotten a few more strength points here, but I think no matter what, that would have just been more damaged units. The problem really is that the U.S. Army was wrecked already when it hit them, and now it's just destroyed. Up here in the Tunis sector, this attack actually got a very good die roll for the Brits. They caused a partial disruption and took a retreat, or partial elimination and took a retreat. The attack across here on the river was terrible. Now, the Germans actually couldn't supply all their units and keep their dumps, so they chose not to supply all their units fully. But this attack completely eliminated a big stack of English. However, this attack, the English managed... This was one where all the air power was thrown in. The English managed to force these guys to retreat. They'd have been eliminated if they hadn't retreated. Maybe they could have held it. If this unit sticks... It's a partial, and then we force them back. Yeah, I'm going to hold the river line here. By taking a step loss, and those guys are disordered. Now, obviously, I'm going to have to burn a dump to recover my units, and that's going to cause greater supply problems anyway. Well, maybe not. Obviously, maybe I recover. Maybe I try to fight with this order with disrupted units. These guys got the big D6D, which is why I want them. With the crack in the line, even with the losses the Brits took, there was a fair chance that I could kind of use the French and some of the Brits to launch an attack and kind of push my way into that little enclave, undermine the river line here, and keep going. There are no more reinforcements except what I buy with refit points. So this is going to be a tough fight, though, for the Brits. Even had they gotten the river line, I thought it was worth taking the step loss to hold them here, this one unit. The rest retreated, and they would have been eliminated if they hadn't. All right, we're going to go on to the Axis turn, and it looks pretty good for them. I think they can hold out. Certainly, maybe not for the whole game, but certainly through turn 7 with one of these ports. They're holding the Gabes line. I don't think that's going to fall easily. This can fall back, and then Tripoli or Tunisia itself is looking pretty solid after that head-on British attack. And I need a break in between the two players. Mistake. That's not time for the Axis turn. It's time for this motorized action for the Allies. That could be serious trouble over here. Wild and woolly action here. So there's a problem. The Germans would love to react into this space against these forces, but all they can do so with is their motorized stuff, which means the armor's going to be halved without that infantry there. So that means only 7 strength points. Are there good odds against that? I got 10, 11, 12, 15. They can get 2 to 1 against me. I'm going to do it because it's the only way of saving those units. I'm going to be throwing more units, good units after lost ones, but I'm hoping for the best results I can. All the air power has already been used. I shot the Bang in the regular movement phase. Over here, the U.S. did forced march, managed to grab this dump. They got lucky. 50-50 chance of actually grabbing it, 1 in 6 chance of failing to take the space. But this really cuts up, no matter what, it would be destroyed or captured, and either way, it cuts the supplies off the Axis force. They're going to have to leave the area. So even with those huge losses, I've still managed to subvert the line around Gabes. And then here, there was just one little Italian infantry here. I had a tank, a 10-point tank. The 1-point infantry that I had left behind that was disrupted, that's gone. And the Brits are able to sleaze their way in, threw some forces into Bizerte in order to, not lose one of the victory point cities. So things are looking a lot better for the Allies across the board. Remember, this is only turn 6. I got next turn to take Tripoli, and right now there is a U.S. force within range of it, and this line is collapsing. If the roadway is what's important to getting there. So you're going to see some major fallbacks and attacks on a little pocket down here, I would guess. You're also seeing the danger of the exploitation into there. All very interesting. Now, of course, the Germans here can't just slice through. The American troops are preventing them from being able to get through. There's zones there. You can't go through them. It's only small infantry forces that you could infiltrate. So now, I guess I get my refit points and some of that action, try to recover some of the stuff. So for example, these guys are all going to become undisrupted because they're within range of the home hacks. This may be able to. Yep, they're able to get to El Agila. There's infinite supply there, so I'll get out of that. So I don't have to pay any of my supply units. Big losses, though, to gain the territory that I took. And that's kind of the hard trade-off that I have in making is I hate to lose lots of units. In this game, unlike Desert Fox, it's clear that, I need to take the terrain. It doesn't matter. My troops don't matter anymore. I need the terrain. I need to capture North Africa as quickly as possible. And once you get to the point where as quickly as possible is now or never, basically, well, it's pretty easy to get even me moving. Got a little ahead of myself in the last video and hadn't resolved the combats, but started thinking that I had. The combats here didn't go so well for the Commonwealth. They were able to drive some of the forces out of here, but with this unit here, they had a retreat path. I could have attacked this unit first, but the odds weren't good, and they actually lost and were driven back with no losses to the Germans. So they didn't get the overwhelming destruction of that little group. But now this can kind of ease its way out and fall back to the next line of defense. Just continuing that slow withdrawal from eastern Libya. And over here, there was a unit. I had to withdraw that. I had units which could have reacted, but they couldn't get into combat. In order to get into combat, they would have needed more movement points than they had. So they chose not to react, and instead I fell back. So the river line is breached, and that's bad news for the Germans. This kind of ability to be defeated in detail on several different locations. That's what Rommel was trying to avoid. Remember, big clusters of lots of troops support each other very, very well in this system. which is why the getting everything together to defend, say, Tunisia itself, Tunis itself, and maybe a couple of other cities, just in case Tunis falls, maybe this whole good weather area. That might be easier. It looks, though, I don't think the Brits are going to get through here. I don't think the Americans are going to get through here. I think the Italians are going to be able to slide away and put another block in their way. We'll see, though. Out of supply means I'm going to lose some units if I'm not careful. All right, now we're going on to the Axis, and I've done the refits. I haven't done everything. I haven't done all the refits. I still have a couple here. I did them over on that side of the map and then realized, whoa, I missed a combat here too. I've got a couple left that I can use for the Brits here, and then I got to remove the disruptions and flip some supply wagons. I probably can't flip these guys. Just too much of a danger of the Germans being able to take them out. In fact, they might be able to be overrun anyway. I don't know how big a deal that is, though. The Germans can't move them on the turn they capture them. They're able to use them for supply, but unless they're launching a total counterattack this way, which probably would lose them Tripoli, even if they succeed, they could make it all the way to Alexandria, no? Yeah, I could roll the map out again if need be. There's pullbacks everywhere along this line, obviously. It still leaves room to subvert it again, but, you know, if I try to stretch across the whole thing, I'll just get pushed back right along the front as well. It's just a matter of, you know, if I'm too weak, I'll get overrun, actually. Some of these stacks are big enough that they could overrun some weaker stacks. So I've got to actually pull, you know, just admit that I'm going to have to keep withdrawing. And once I do, well, it seems a little better to be in this kind of position, although there's a possibility of an end run over there actually destroying some pieces. That may give me some opportunity to hold ground due to a British mistake on a launch of an attack. That last attack wasn't terribly good for the Brits, and we might be wearing them down to the point where maybe I don't have to keep falling back. But I kind of do anyway, because the Americans are coming. And you can see this hideous line of out of general supply. Now these guys, some of them are going to go back in general supply, but some of them aren't going to make it, and they're going to have to make rolls for depletions as they head for Tripoli. And then over here, pulling back for a little shell around Tunis itself, I'm giving up any chance of Soissons being, you know, an additional possibility, or a stab down here to Sfax. Tunis is what I want to hold. I'm probably not going to be able to do it. This doesn't look strong enough, you know. So the expenditure of huge amounts of Allied manpower to gain the ground quickly is clearly working in this game. When you can't figure out what else to do, throw a whole bunch of troops on the line and see what happens. Again, numerical superiority is the big advantage the Allies have here. They can throw away troops. I'm trying to hit what I can. If I get a few breakthroughs, then I'm at Tunis. Maybe not taking it, but I'm at it. You know, if I can undermine this line. If I can't, if I'm flung back, I don't get Tunis. Likewise, over here, I have a much, much easier job. I totally outnumber the German unit that I've chosen to pick on. This guy has some interesting choices. He could stick around. I could throw more troops in. There's no way that I could prevent these guys from moving. But this is the only way I can destroy this unit, is basically sacrifice perhaps these units. And that's probably what's going to happen, is the Germans are going to throw some units into here. Along this line, I can't do anything. My forces were too far back to launch a real attack across the board, and I'm trying to hit here, and then maybe after that withdraws, I can get a better hit and go a little further. I have no real hope of making it to Tripoli with those troops in time. Not in supply. Well, 4, 6, 8, 10, 14, 16, 17, 18, 19, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. I can actually hit Tripoli. So if I drive him out of here, I actually have a free road to Tripoli if I force march. Which really means, depending on what happens at Tunis, this is probably pretty much decided everywhere else, because I do have the ability to hit Tripoli. So the big important thing, what happens on the Tunis line over here? If the Germans pull out, I can advance. If they don't pull out, well, I probably defeat them and can advance. I've kept far enough away on the rest of the border that I can go in. I knew that was, it didn't look like I could make it, but it's a close enough run. 28 movement points is all you need to get there. 4, 6, 8, 10, 14, 15, 17, 18, 20. Yep. Sweet. And they will be in supply from where they mixed results here, which means not good for the Allies. They need to succeed everywhere. Over here, the Germans stood and fought, got pushed away, no big deal. Gives me an extra hex, makes it even easier to get in there. Tripoli falls. Over here, the U.S. troops, well, now they're realizing they're going the wrong way, but they took out the big unit, and these guys were actually out of supply, so they didn't fare as well as one might have hoped. It turned out kind of a wash. Over here, the French did okay on their side, although they got flung back in a couple of locations. But the British Army dissolved. It just full air power by the Axis on that one, on two big British stacks. They were already all weakened units, and they're all gone now. With these disrupted units, there's no chance of forcing the issue and winning Tunis this turn. The only question is, well, can I send the U.S. up to handle the job next turn? I've got to send some sort of garrison to hold Gabes, and maybe the line here in front of it. But other than that, it's all, set up pretty well. I would say we're going to lose some of these dumps back here. The Germans down here are basically about ready to surrender. The Germans over here were tracing their supply from Tripoli. They're going to have, and Italians, they're going to have trouble facing whatever there is, which will probably be Commonwealth troops streaming forward eventually. Serious difficulty in trying to launch some sort of attack against Gabes or Tripoli for that matter, even if it's only weak forces there. But I might be able to succeed. But over here, this is pretty well defended now, and it's gonna take some real digging to get them out of there. On to the second movement, the motorized segment. Well, the net effect is the Axis are nearly without supply here. They have a truck. They can't do anything with that next turn. They're going to be out of supply for the entirety of the turn, which means, one, their attacks are reduced, but also they have this possibility of just being depleted throughout the turn, unless they can make a breakthrough in the first movement phase and get up to this other dump, their only other supply source down here. These guys are also out of supply, with very little that they can do about it, except maybe Tripoli. If they could capture Tripoli while out of supply, and there's a couple of units there, I got some refit points into play for the Brits there. The Americans have pulled back to the Gabes line, and most of their force is up here in Tunisia already. It's really fast to move along the roads in this game, and the roads in this one are shorter than that long big road going across Desert Fox. Even though it kind of weaves and turns a little bit, it's still not as much map to cover from up here to there. This is just one map. It's a pretty safe little route. The big problem, the Brits up here, Bizerte, possibly even up in here, Jebel Abiad. A couple of supply dumps there. I don't really need those dumps too much, But if the Germans can extend their line into, and it looks like they can, into this region here, it's going to be a harder job digging them out. With the U.S. and the French kind of fought another round and survived it. Did some damage, took some damage, all the same there. But yeah, this is undepleted everything, losing my supplies there. But overall, obviously the Allies have not won this game. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to take all the ports by the time turn 9 rolls around. The capture of Tripoli has a little airfield, so we got a new air point, and that took one away from the Axis. So now it's down to 6-5. That's about it. Rolling into the Axis turn here. And with this supply modifier, they're very unlikely to get any supplies. They need well, a 6 will get them 1, which is useful. Well, it's not too bad. So far they haven't been getting them. The last couple turns they've been weak on supplies. Question then, of course, is where to bring it in. Well, it's got to come in down here. If I ever face an overall attack again, the attack that I had, 1 or 2 units were out of supply for, and it was no big deal. You can see they repulsed the enemy fairly easily with that. But that may be harder with a strong force coming around their flank here. I don't have, I have a single artillery sitting here. That's not a very good defensive thing, but everything else had to retreat or pretty much die or get reduced pretty heavily. So it may be tough for the Germans to hold on to everything, hold on to anything up there for the next turn. But this turn they made it through. They're going to get at least a marginal victory out of it. This is a clear situation where if somebody viewed victory as a binary situation, win-loss, at this point the Allies say, well, I lost, man. I'm done. That's unreasonable to me. The different levels of victory mean different things. You want to play them out, unless they're willing to concede the ultimate level of victory, that they will not take all the ports. Keep playing, because each of those layers means something a little different than would simply, hey, I won or I lost. I never like people who just see it as an absolute binary situation. But here's the thing. What do those victories really mean? What does it mean that the Axis was able to stay stuck in this little pocket for some time? That's not, historically, that's not a very valuable thing to judge them on. In some senses, the whole commitment to throw more troops into Tunisia was a bad idea to begin with. And then once you do that, really the key should be saving the army, given that you can't withdraw. That should be the goal in the game, and that clearly, is a problem with this one. Is, okay, so what would it mean if my army was wiped out, but somehow I ended up to get Gabas here? What does it mean if I didn't withdraw my units? Because historically, the units were safely withdrawn. That was the amazing factor of that, and that's not covered at all in this game. I just feel like somebody had a really clever idea of, hey, we can extend, we can build a new game off the same system, whatever. But then they couldn't resolve the basic core problems of how that game should actually be designed from outside of the system. Once you have the system, what do you do to drive the game, etc.? And it's especially bad when you patch it onto Desert Fox. Just, what you want to do in Desert Fox is not necessarily what you want to do. Well, what you want to do when you're playing Trail of the Fox is not added to it. Is not necessarily what you'd want to do if you're playing Desert Fox. And that's actually a flaw to Desert Fox too, because there's no desire to withdraw in Desert Fox. Once the Germans can actually hold near El Aguila, but they can also hold near El Alamein, not too far from that. And usually, if they decide, I've gotten far enough, I'm just going to plug this and I'm not going to keep pushing, I'm not going to attack. It's tough, at least with me playing, with my incompetence in attacking. It's very tough for the Allies to push through that. In which case, if you can bottle up the Allies there, if you did reasonably well in Desert Fox, you bottle them up there, you get a lot more map before Tripoli's threatened by those big Commonwealth armies. Of course, you get a lot of map to send back whatever reserves you're going to send back to help on this game. You can see though. Well, you can't really see because I did the swap of troops. What I was going to say is I haven't sent a lot back into the Tunisia map. And certainly nothing has made it all the way to Tunisia. The only thing it's done is some of the troops may have helped cap this a little bit. So, I don't know. It doesn't take a lot to send back to save. Boy, I got called on another error on the previous video where I think some of the out of supply units moved, motorized units moved. Now, they're allowed to move, but only 1 hex. And even that's being pretty liberal, to tell you the truth. But I moved them full distance. Now, I don't know how much of an effect it had. I'm, like many errors, just going to ignore it and try to play correctly now. But, yeah, that's a serious thing. I guess one of the things that I keep in mind is, oh my God, it's terrible to be out of supply. But it really isn't. Without that, for the motorized units, it wouldn't be that bad. They could slip their way back in. It basically means that probably these guys should just be pretty much gone. They couldn't have defended themselves. But they are pretty much gone. They can't go anywhere. There's a couple foot units, but now if I'm playing it correctly, they're not going to be able to recapture supply. They may have caused a little bit of trouble to the Americans, but that's okay. Over here, we've got a slightly different situation where I will have the potential for supply, at least for a very brief period for the next turn. That's going to be an issue, though. Right now, I ought to be throwing my out of supply markers all over the map and trying to figure out what I'm doing with my axis. Okay, now up here the Germans have not only taken Bizerte, they actually drove up here. There's no zone here from this artillery unit. It's actually depleted artillery, but you can't tell easily with this game. You can in the original. They knocked out a couple of supply spaces that the Brits have. Probably not too important because the supply coming in from the core hexes is worthwhile, but it didn't really cost me anything. Set up strong defenses here, and also, well, they've got a disrupted, depleted Italian infantry here. I can't really undisrupt my units. I have 3 depots, which is barely what I need. I didn't get a new one in this turn. Had I, maybe I could have... No, I don't have any ports here. I was thinking maybe I could have done something to save it. Over here, we've got an attack on Tripoli by some infantry. This is really the only way to save me at this point. And actually, they're going to be in combat supply. They weren't able to make it into real supply, I don't think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I think they just missed crossing that barrier. So I'll leave them there, but they're going to have combat supply, which means they're actually fairly effective. No, it doesn't. They weren't able to move that far. This was 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I think they're in real supply, though, actually. No. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Yeah, they're probably in real supply. The problem is that I moved them in the motorized movement phase, which they can't do. So, well, they're in actual supply, though, in time for that. Which means they won't be destroyed immediately, although they will be in trouble when this falls. All right, no attack there. Oops. And now I've really just got to make rolls for all my out of supply units to see if they survive the turn. And then the markers come off. They'll be gone at the beginning of the next turn. The reason there is they're just there to remind me that I do need to take the depletion, that I can't move them, etc. I just forgot, damn, those things can't move in the motorized phase. I'm really good at forgetting little things, or big things, or anything. It's just the nature of the game. This one's caused me probably more problems than most, but I suspect I've always been this scatterbrained in games. I know when I'm playing a game, somebody will catch me and say, yeah, you can't do that. And we're like, oh, whoops. But then again, I'll forget things that are to my advantage too. So, yeah. Speaking of forgetting things, I completely forgot to ever worry about, not that the Axis has done much in the way of attacks, if any, the coordinated attack penalty, making checks for that with the 3 different Panzer units or whatever. Just have not worried about that at all, the divisions. And, well, I don't think it's really made much difference because I don't think I've launched any attacks. Unlike in the historical where there was a bit of battle going on down here. My Germans, other than right at the beginning, and that may have had an effect. I'm not sure what I chose to land and what I didn't in any particular place. Makes me regret having replaced the counters because, well, although there are some differences with the motorized units and everything, that was a bit of a headache. The thing I wanted to point out over here at Berserk, the fall of that gave the Axis nothing. They've already owned Berserk before. Berserk, I don't know. But it did cost the Allies an air point. So they're now down to only 4 again, along with the Axis being at the 6 that they were at. So after the first movement for the Allies, the Commonwealth has built up and tightened its cordon around the Axis units there. I don't have to do a whole hell of a lot. Some of those units are just going to disintegrate if nothing is done by them. Now, they could try some sort of breakout or something, but they're not going to get very far. In particular, basically, I can only support and supply, 10 points of stacking points of those Germans off that one dump. If I do that, I lose the dump. 5 points of stacking points, I believe, if I don't want to lose the dump. It may be 6. But anyway, something's 5, something's 6, I think. Well, I know defense is 6. And that's not completely nailed down in either game, actually, how much total supply you can pull defensively. It appears contradictory or ambiguous. But anyway, there's a lot more than that here. And if I do that, I still only have 3 stacking points of supply that I can do with an attack without losing my supply. And it's going to be tough for me, let's say I launch an attack here, to even get this dump. I've diverted some more forces up here to Tripoli to make sure that these infantry can't just take it. The motorized down here isn't going to be able to do it. These guys probably aren't going to be able to do it, since if I do launch a successful attack, I probably don't have the mobility anymore to drive my supply so that I have my motorized units moving more than 1 hex. I may be able to get this dump I can't see how. The only way I can see anything happening is an attack against this. The only way I'm going to get a good attack against that is with significant force, which will eat up my supply dump. So I feel that those units are just destroyed. We'll see if I can come up with something to come out of them. Uh-oh. There was a reason I wasn't that close. Okay, well that opens up a little bit more room for them to maneuver there. Okay. Up here, we got the French attacking here, the Americans attacking in these spaces, and the Brits here. The Germans were able to react with a number of their units, indeed pulling their armor down here. They still got some defenses here. There's nothing of great value here to the Allies, so they're not really defending it, but there are dumps and stuff, and those could be of some worth. But I gotta take Tunis. If I can't take it this turn, well, next turn becomes a bigger victory. If I can't take it by the end of the game, that's an even bigger victory, but I'm taking my chance to try to take it now. I'm not calculating all my odds. You know what? When I'm facing a line like this, I'm better off not doing it. When I calculate those odds, I immediately say, oh my God, I can't do it. And the truth is, this game actually allows you to take offensive actions with worse odds than it looks like you can succeed in. Just for a number of reasons. Sometimes it's best just to say the hell with it and throw your units in and let the defender do his worries to try to get your odds as low as he can. I also can't really control the odds too much, as the defender even, because the attacker can choose to attack differently from how I expect. Although, with the national restrictions, I can pretty much expect the French are going to attack this, the Americans are going to attack with this stack against that, this stack against that, and the Brits are going to attack there. So I could have figured it out, but the hell with it. It's, you know, there's only so much of that kind of arithmetic that I really want to do in a game, and this one pushes that envelope pretty. Where the battle is, at Tunis, mixed results. The French managed to chase a couple of these units up here. They actually could not get here because there was a zone in the way. The French are actually here. They couldn't run to Tunis because there was a zone they would have had to run through. So they fled up here into this little tiny area. Other attacks, you can see the Germans held here against Americans somewhat. Some of the Americans have been pushed back a little bit. For the most part, it looks to me like I'm going to be able to take Tunis. I'll move the Americans here, the French to do a Sokolov attack. The British got repulsed. I don't see how I can get Bizerte this turn, though. And that means the Axis manages to hold out yet another turn with their little pocket. At least. Chances are that's going to fall too, and we're going to get a turn 9 victory here. The French were knocked back, but the Americans managed to take Tunis. That's the end of Axis supply in Africa. They might potentially get one on either of their turns, which would make Bizerte a little easier to hold, perhaps. But they're in a lot of trouble. They've pretty much been destroyed. It's just a matter of, for victory conditions, they're able to hold this another turn. There's no way that that can be taken from them at this point. And they'll try to build some sort of little defensive perimeter again to make it a little harder to take. Maybe they can get the full victory. One way to look at what's kind of escaped is sort of these. This means some troops have escaped out of Africa. It doesn't mean the whole formation has, obviously, because the formation was destroyed, but as compared to, say, the units over here, which are captured, essentially, and these guys probably captured, these guys probably captured. Not a good result in terms of troops that have been withdrawn compared to the historical, I would say. But that's not the goal of the game, for whatever reason. After the first Axis pulse, they've pulled back as much as they can. These guys only 1 hex. I've got an out of general supply that I'm just marking to say, hey, everything's out. Same here. These guys I specifically marked because they are getting close to the Allied units there. And over here I had to specifically mark it. The infantry is in general supply, but these guys busted loose and cracked that open. And now they have an opportunity to try to take this hex against these disrupted units. Now, I have to check the the rule I never use, which is the destroy your own supply dump during the reaction phase. I don't know if a disrupted unit can do it. It's a 50-50 chance no matter if it is allowed. But that would rip the last hope out of this force for being able to do anything significant. Unless they can reach Tripoli, which would be really significant. I forgot to note and mark, a couple of these units were not in combat supply when they attacked, so they're now disrupted. There was actually a chance, so I went for it. I had an overrun against these guys. They were very weak, only 2 strength points each. And I had a significant force, over 20. So I ran them over, and now I'm hitting Tripoli. And I've actually got it bottled in there. The attack on Tripoli is going to eat my dump, but this is the only significant thing these forces can do. And it was pretty heroic, actually, when you think about it. I've got to move some of my other units, whatever they can do. They're not going to be in supply no matter what. So, given that there's some question about the situation we're going to see, I'll throw some markers on them. Turns out that attack on Tripoli was pretty pointless. I was on the 1-to-1 table with a combat shift against me because they had artillery support. And I got 5 stacking points there, which if they were attacking would kill the dump, but defending it takes 6. Now you're only allowed, the way the rules are written, to trace 5 to any single dump. So there's a definite contradiction. Well, not a contradiction, but there's something definitely wrong with the rules there. An implication that something is going wrong, and I don't know, what it's going to be. Anyway, what we're going to do here is look at the out of supply status, and then we move to the next turn. We got the air points, and my scratch marks are down, but we're down to 4 each now because the capture of Tunis swung another point away from the Axis and one into the Allies. They've held that all game, so that one wouldn't switch. I don't write down the locations. You really should, because you can only gain from them once. So, for example, the Axis did not get berserked. They didn't get a point from that, even though they took one away from the Allies. And they can take it away as many times as they like. So you may not want to capture things unless you can hold them. The Axis ended up with the initiative option, which puts them in a kind of weird position. Obviously, they don't want to let the Commonwealth go first, because if the Commonwealth goes first, they can win the game on the first turn. So there's some opportunity for me to do something by going first, but there isn't much. Not with all these forces disrupted, and I've got a supply depot here, but that's all I got. And, but I might get another depot. I might be able to do something. I get a couple of refit points that are totally useless, if I let the Commonwealth go first. So we'll take it and see what we can. Well, I actually got the best roll I could on the supply chart, which was good enough to get me 2 supply wagons, which gives me the ability to probably defend with everything. And also, I upgraded my disruptions, which maybe I couldn't do. I'm going to ignore this thing. It can't do anything. I'm going to ignore that side of the board. It can't do anything. Really, it all comes down to, can I take Bizerte? Had to stay here, because the U.S. actually built itself some Rangers, commandos. They could have dropped them right into Bizerte. That's the last hex that they can do that in, and just seized it. So this is the extent of the defenses here, and we're going to give it a shot. See if the Allied forces can break through that little ring. Chances are I don't know. I think they can, but we'll see. There's not a lot else that can happen. I can throw some reserves from back here, try to get a second wave or something moving, just in case. Kind of funny, they give Allied reinforcements here. The trucks are fine. but actual refit points, which cannot possibly serve any purpose the way the rules are written towards determining victory or not. I guess you could keep playing after the Germans have won and let them do some kind of counterattack or something. I don't see much point to that. It's pretty obvious the game's going to be in, just a matter of trying to hold a little peace. And it's not like they're going to be able to create some kind of big breakthrough out of it that would take over all of Tunisia again or something. And I can't imagine the game flowing that way, to tell you the truth. But who knows? Anyway, it's an odd little piece of information to have there, this additional replacements. Desert Fox doesn't do that kind of thing. Now, this poor sucker can only be placed in this area back here. He probably doesn't have enough movement points to aid the other US troops, so I'm just dropping him here for a one-on-one attack against Bizerta itself. A success there and it's all over. And I've got attacks planned against everything else, which might collapse things in and be able to take that on. I can't really make those attacks first because this guy doesn't give me any help with a zone of control. So I want to make his first attack there just so that, I don't know, see what happens. That's not very likely to succeed. We're at 1-to-1 in a town, which is the 2 column. I've got nothing going for me here. But I could throw in a bunch of air in the hopes of knocking the defender out of there. The defender has no option to stay, and he's only got one step. So I think that's what I'm going to go. I think that's actually my best chance right now, because these defenses are fairly strong, actually. So let's see what we do. And I don't want to think too hard on it. So I'm on column 2, and I'm going to throw all 4 Allied air in on this. Now, the Germans have to decide, do they want to throw all their air in to try to break this thing? If I roll an 8, nothing happens to the attacker. Or if I roll a 6. So I think I've got to throw some air support in here too. Do I have to throw all 4? I'll throw 2 in. That keeps me a couple. So that gets me to column 5. With 2 that drops to 3, and with 4 it goes up to 9. This unit is a 2 quality unit. Yeah, I'm moving too quickly there. It's going to take a partial disruption or depletion. That's going to kill it. And meanwhile, a D5D. Well, that essentially means both sides are wiped out, right? I take a D. I'm disrupted. No, I can advance because the hex is empty. So the commandos took this. I'll finish up the rest of the battles just for completeness to see whether or not I would have had a decent chance of breaking through there. Well, I don't think they could have made it without those commandos making that sneak attack. I just did 1 round. I haven't gone to the motorized, but nothing budged. The Germans took some casualties, but for the most part, it was just a failure to move that line at all. And, the next attack would be to try to budge this line again. There's nothing that's going to be able to slide through and make an attack. So this would have held out even longer if it wasn't for that kind of daring raid. There were a couple of little daring aspects in this game, actually, that breakout down here. I think more than I saw over in Desert Fox, mainly because, well, I was getting more used to the system again after a long time. But also, this one is so hopeless. The Axis, not in terms of winning or losing the game, but in terms of the situation the Axis is in. Clearly, they're not going to survive this and hold on to North Africa much beyond the length of the game. So the goal becomes much, much more, well, I got to do something here, I got to take my chances. And I think that actually makes for a more interesting game. I think my problem with Desert Fox is that I'm too afraid to do things in a lot of cases. I'd probably be better off every now and then just saying, the hell with it. I'm going to throw everything against the line because I'm not getting any movement. But there's always I could lose so badly that I lose the game, in the biggest possible way. I lose Alexandria, or I lose, El Aguila, Tripoli in this case, in the early part of the game. And when I look at the numbers, it doesn't add up to good-looking attacks. But, if the Germans are stretched on supply, it's sometimes worth hitting them across the line. If they pull back, you gain terrain. If they stand and fight at what look like good odds, they may actually be taking more important losses and have to take supply hits or something to maintain their army in the field. And that makes their position all the more untenable. All right, anyway, it was fun coming back and taking a look at this one. I haven't played in a long time. I haven't played a lot of games in a long time. There's a lot of games I haven't played at all. That's one of the reasons, that I'm always pushing a new game out rather than sometimes sitting back and replaying something. I tend not to play things too often in a row or anything like that, but the current status of my game collection is kind of forcing me more and more into sample everything, give everything a shot, especially with the videos. All right, let's send this one up, and I'll come back with a review of both games, really.